The channel has a lot of assets. You can subscribe to the channel, thereby greatly help its promotion and raise the asset. Thank you. In the vibrant city of Metropolis, back in 2016, a young woman named Emily was getting ready for a crucial business conference on trading and investments. As an aspiring trader, she understood that this conference had the potential to significantly impact her career. Emily had been involved in trading stocks and bonds for a few years and had recently ventured into the realm of cryptocurrency. Her goal was to acquire as much knowledge as possible and build connections with fellow traders. However, Emily faced a predicament. She needed a place to stay in Metropolis for a couple of days, but the cost of hotels was exorbitant. That's when she recollected the well-known online marketplace, Craigslist. She browsed the website and stumbled upon an affordable apartment for rent in a desirable location. The advertisement provided detailed descriptions and images of the apartment, and it seemed ideal for her requirements. Emily promptly contacted the landlord, a man named Michael. They exchanged several emails, and Michael agreed to rent the apartment to Emily during her conference. They settled on a price, and Emily transferred the funds to Michael's account. Everything appeared to be progressing smoothly. The day of the conference arrived, and Emily flew to Metropolis. She took a taxi from the airport to the address Michael had provided. As the taxi pulled up to the apartment building, Emily couldn't help but feel a tinge of nervousness. She had heard stories of people falling victim to scams on Craigslist, but she dismissed those thoughts as mere paranoia. Emily entered the building and proceeded to the apartment. She knocked on the door, but there was no response. She knocked again, but still no answer. Worry started to consume Emily. She retrieved her phone and dialed Michael's number, but it went directly to voicemail. Emily left a message and decided to wait for a few more minutes. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a group of armed men rushed out. They seized Emily, forcefully pulling her inside the apartment. Emily let out a scream, but the men covered her mouth and dragged her into the living room. They demanded that she surrender all her valuable possessions, including her wallet, phone, and laptop. Fearful for her life, Emily complied. As the men rummaged through the apartment, Emily noticed a familiar name on a piece of mail lying on the table. It wasn't Michael's name, but the name of a young man who had been brutally assaulted in Montana the previous year. It dawned on Emily that she had become a victim of the same gang of robbers who had targeted the young man. The men took everything they could find and left Emily alone in the apartment. She was petrified and shaken, but she managed to contact the police. The authorities swiftly arrived at the scene and escorted Emily to the police station. She provided them with a detailed description of the robbers and the apartment, hoping that they would be apprehended and brought to justice. After conducting a thorough investigation, the police successfully identified and arrested the robbers. They were brought to trial, and the young man who had been attacked in Montana testified against them. The robbers were ultimately convicted and handed lengthy prison sentences. Emily considered herself fortunate to have survived the harrowing ordeal, but she learned a valuable lesson. She realized the importance of exercising caution and vigilance when utilizing online marketplaces. Additionally, she understood that the world of trading and investments could be perilous, emphasizing the need to be cautious about her associations. Emily continued to pursue her career as a trader. The terrifying experience she had endured in Metropolis remained ingrained in her memory. In the year 2020, in a quaint village in Kansas, a man named Matthew was in need of someone to tidy up his residence. With a hectic schedule and numerous commitments, he had fallen behind on cleaning. Matthew was unfamiliar with anyone who could take on the task, so he turned to an online platform, hoping to find a dependable and affordable cleaner. After several days of searching, he came across an individual named Michael, who had previous experience in house cleaning and positive reviews. Matthew contacted Michael, and after a few exchanges, they agreed on a price and scheduled a date for the cleaning session. The designated day arrived, and Michael arrived punctually. Matthew showed him around the house, pointing out the areas that required attention. Michael appeared professional and immediately got to work. Matthew left to run errands, expecting to return to a spotless home. To his astonishment, when Matthew returned a few hours later, the house was in worse condition than when he had left. He discovered Michael lounging on the couch, engrossed in television and sipping a beer. Disappointed and infuriated, Matthew confronted Michael about the situation. Michael apologized, claiming fatigue and the need for a break. Matthew, though frustrated, agreed to give him some time to rest and retreated to his room to calm down. However, moments later, Michael approached Matthew, demanding more money than their agreed-upon price. Matthew refused, explaining to Michael that they had struck a deal and he couldn't simply demand more money. But Michael persisted, producing a gun from his pocket and pointing it at Matthew. Frozen with fear, Matthew didn't know how to react. Michael pulled the trigger, and the sound of the gunshot reverberated through the house. Matthew collapsed to the floor, bleeding and struggling for breath. Unaffected by Matthew's condition, Michael seized the money from his wallet before departing the premises. Matthew died instantly, leaving behind a grief-stricken family in shock. News of the murder quickly spread throughout the village, prompting the authorities to launch an extensive manhunt for Michael. They meticulously combed through the area, scouring for any leads that could help track him down. Witness testimonies were gathered, and evidence was collected, yet Michael seemed to have vanished without a trace. The village was on edge, with residents fearful of venturing out of their homes. Parents kept a watchful eye on their children, and everyone remained vigilant, alert for any signs of danger. Weeks turned into months as the search for Michael persisted, but the authorities made no headway in locating him. Then, one day, a tip was received. Someone had spotted a man resembling Michael in a neighboring town. The authorities swiftly responded, and after a brief pursuit, successfully apprehended him. Michael was brought to trial, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. The judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The village breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that justice had been served. However, for Matthew's family, the pain and sorrow never subsided. They were left with an irreplaceable void in their lives. Each day, they mourned Matthew's loss and held on to the invaluable lesson his tragic death had taught them: to exercise caution and vigilance when dealing with strangers, even those who may initially appear trustworthy. In the year 2019, in the vibrant state of California, a young woman named Emily was in search of a laptop for her studies. Having heard about an online marketplace called Craigslist, she decided to explore it to find a reputable seller. After discovering a potential vendor, Emily arranged a meeting with the seller to finalize the purchase in person. On the day of the meeting, Emily felt a mix of excitement and anticipation. She had diligently saved enough money to buy the laptop she needed, eagerly anticipating the convenience it would bring to her studies. She dressed in her finest attire and made her way to the agreed-upon location, a serene street nestled among a few residences and a nearby plaza. Approaching the address, Emily spotted a man waiting for her. He held a laptop and greeted her with a warm smile. Introducing himself as Ryan, they engaged in a conversation about the laptop, and Ryan demonstrated an impressive knowledge of its features and specifications. However, after a few minutes, Ryan's demeanor abruptly changed. He turned aggressive, demanding that Emily hand over all of her cash. Confused and frightened, Emily couldn't comprehend why Ryan would want her money. Momentarily hesitating, she found herself overpowered as Ryan forcibly pushed her against a nearby wall. In an instant, Ryan brandished a knife, launching a vicious attack on Emily. She attempted to defend herself, but Ryan's strength and agility proved overwhelming. Repeatedly stabbing her about 20 times, Emily cried out for help. Darkness enveloped her as she collapsed onto the ground. The commotion reached the ears of passers-by at the nearby plaza, who promptly dialed emergency services. Despite their swift response, it was too late. Emily succumbed to her injuries. The police arrived at the scene, finding Ryan covered in blood, clutching Emily's laptop and stolen money. They promptly apprehended him and placed him under arrest. The subsequent trial subjected Emily's family and friends to a lengthy and agonizing process. They had lost a brilliant and promising young woman and sought justice for her untimely demise. The evidence presented against Ryan was overwhelming, ultimately leading to his conviction on charges of murder and robbery. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Emily's loved ones were devastated by the loss, finding solace in the fact that justice had been served. They held on to the belief that Emily's memory would endure, aspiring to use her tragic story as a cautionary tale about the perils of online encounters with strangers. In the end, Emily's legacy represented hope and resilience, forever cherished by her dear ones as a radiant presence in their lives. In the year 2018, in the bustling streets of Metro City, the atmosphere was vibrant as people carried out their daily routines. Among them was a young man named Alex, eagerly anticipating the upcoming concert of his favorite band. Alex had been on the hunt for tickets for weeks, but they were sold out everywhere. Frustrated and desperate, he decided to try his luck on an online platform. After hours of scrolling through listings, Alex finally stumbled upon an ad offering the desired tickets. The seller, who called themselves Max, had listed the tickets at a reasonable price. Alex wasted no time and immediately contacted Max, arranging a meeting in a quiet corner of the city center. On the designated day, Alex arrived at the agreed-upon location, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. Although he had never bought tickets from a stranger before, he was willing to take the risk to witness his beloved band perform. Max was already present, waiting for Alex. Approaching Max, Alex sensed an uneasy aura. Max appeared restless and on edge. Despite the feeling, Alex tried to dismiss it and handed over the cash to Max in exchange for the tickets. However, the moment Max had the money in hand, a chilling turn of events occurred. Max brandished a firearm and pointed it at Alex. "Give me everything you have," Max shouted. Shocked and terrified, Alex was paralyzed with fear. He didn't know how to respond. In a fit of desperation, Max fired several shots, hitting Alex in the chest and leg. Collapsing to the ground, Alex bled profusely, struggling for each breath. Taking advantage of the situation, Max swiftly snatched Alex's belongings, including his shoes, phone, and cash. Leaving Alex lying on the ground, fighting for survival, Max made a hasty escape. As Alex's vision blurred, he caught a fading glimpse of Max fleeing with his possessions. Fortuitously, a passing police patrol heard the gunshots and rushed to the scene. Discovering Alex gravely injured and barely conscious, they urgently called for an ambulance, ensuring his prompt transportation to the hospital. Alex managed to survive the brutal attack, but was left permanently scarred, both physically and emotionally. Losing all his money and identification made it arduous for him to rebuild his life. Above all, the incident shattered his trust in humanity. Law enforcement initiated a thorough investigation into the crime and successfully tracked down Max. He was apprehended and subsequently stood trial. Revelations surfaced, exposing Max's history of violence and involvement in various criminal activities. Following a protracted and grueling legal process, Max was found guilty of attempted murder and robbery. The court handed down a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring he could no longer inflict harm on others. As for Alex, he embarked on the arduous journey of rebuilding his life. It took him considerable time to regain his confidence and faith in people, but he eventually succeeded. The experience never faded from his memory, but he refused to let it define his existence. Instead, he pursued his dreams and crafted a fulfilling life, always mindful of the need for caution and vigilance in an unpredictable world. The incident left an indelible impact on Alex and all those who knew him. It served as a stark reminder of the perils of trusting strangers and the significance of exercising caution in an uncertain world. In 2017 in Los Angeles, California, a woman named Jessica was struggling to pay her bills. She had lost her job as a waitress and was facing eviction from her apartment. She decided to sell some of her jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother, hoping to make enough money to pay the rent and buy some groceries. She placed an ad on Craigslist offering a gold necklace and a pair of earrings for $500. She received several responses, but most of them were underpriced or scammed. She was about to give up when she received a message from a man who claimed to be interested in buying her jewelry. He said his name was Mark, and he was an antique jewelry collector. He offered her $600 for the necklace and earrings, saying they were worth more than she had asked for. Jessica was thrilled. She arranged to meet Mark at a Starbucks near her apartment the next day. She hoped he wasn't lying or trying to trick her. She really needed the money. The next day she put on her jewelry and took the bus to Starbucks. She arrived 10 minutes early and waited for Mark. She nervously checked her phone, hoping he would show up. She saw a man walking toward the Starbucks entrance. He looked just like the picture he had sent her. He was tall and handsome, with dark hair and blue eyes. He was wearing a leather jacket and jeans. He smiled at her and waved. "Hi, are you Jessica?" he asked. "Yes, I am. And you must be Mark," she said. "That's me. Nice to meet you," he said. He walked over to her and gave her a brief hug. Jessica felt a little awkward, but tried to act friendly. "Why don't we go inside and have coffee?" he asked. "Sure," she replied. They walked into Starbucks and ordered drinks. Mark paid for both. Jessica thanked him. They sat down at a table by the window. Mark looked at Jessica with admiration. "You're very beautiful, Jessica," he said. "Thank you," she replied, blushing. He leaned closer to her and whispered in her ear, "And your jewelry is amazing." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. She pulled away slightly and looked at him. "Thank you. This belonged to my grandmother," she said. "It's very precious, you know," he said. "I know. That's why I'm selling it," she said. He nodded sympathetically. "I understand. Times are tough, huh?" She nodded sadly. "Yes, they are." He reached out and gently touched her hand. "I'm sorry to hear that. You deserve better." She smiled weakly. "Thank you. You're very kind." He smiled back. "No problem. I'm here to help." He looked around the Starbucks and then back at her. "Listen, Jessica, I have an idea," he said. "What is it?" she asked. He lowered his voice and spoke in a conspiratorial tone. "How about we skip this place and go somewhere more private? I've got a car parked outside. We can drive over to my place and talk in a more comfortable environment." Jessica felt uncomfortable. She didn't know Mark well enough to trust him. She wanted to sell him her jewelry and leave as soon as possible. "I don't know Mark," she said hesitantly. He squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Don't worry, Jessica. I'm not going to hurt you or anything." Jessica's intuition kicked in, and she quickly withdrew her hand from Mark's grasp. Something about his demeanor and the sudden change in his tone made her uneasy. "I'm sorry, Mark, but I'm not comfortable going to your place," she said firmly. Mark's expression shifted from charm to frustration, his smile fading. "Come on, Jessica, I promise you'll be safe." "I just thought we could discuss the jewelry in a more relaxed setting," he insisted, his voice tinged with annoyance. Jessica shook her head, her resolve strengthening. "No, thank you. I prefer to keep our meeting here, in public," she replied, mustering her courage. Mark's frustration transformed into anger, and his eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Jessica," he said through clenched teeth. Jessica felt a wave of unease wash over her. She realized she needed to end this encounter and distance herself from Mark as soon as possible. "I think I've changed my mind about selling the jewelry." "Sorry for the inconvenience," she said, her voice quivering slightly. Mark's face twisted with anger, and he leaned in closer, his voice barely audible. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. Fear gripped Jessica as she realized the danger she was in. She glanced around, desperately seeking help. Then, summoning every ounce of strength, she pushed her chair back and stood up abruptly. "Stay away from me," she shouted, drawing the attention of nearby customers. Mark's eyes widened, startled by her sudden outburst. The commotion attracted the Starbucks staff, who quickly approached the table. "What's going on here?" the barista asked, concern etched on her face. "This man, he's been harassing me," Jessica managed to say, her voice trembling. The barista looked at Mark, her expression hardening. "You need to leave, sir," she said firmly. Mark scowled, realizing he had lost control of the situation. He stood up, glaring at Jessica before turning and storming out of the coffee shop. Shaking and on the verge of tears, Jessica sank back into her chair, grateful for the intervention of the Starbucks staff and the support of the other customers. The barista called the police, who arrived promptly and took Jessica's statement. They assured her that they would do everything possible to ensure her safety and investigate the incident thoroughly. Over the next few weeks, Jessica took extra precautions, always looking over her shoulder and being mindful of her surroundings. The incident had left her shaken, but she refused to let fear consume her. She was determined to move forward and rebuild her life. In the summer of 2017, a man named John decided to sell his smartphone through an online marketplace. He placed an advertisement, and soon after, he received a message from a potential buyer. After exchanging a few messages, they agreed to meet at a nearby shopping center. Feeling a mix of nerves and excitement, John arrived at the designated meeting spot. He noticed a young woman sitting on a bench, engrossed in her phone. John approached her, introduced himself, and confirmed that she was the interested buyer. They haggled over the price, and the woman appeared satisfied with the deal. As they were finalizing the transaction, John suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. Startled, he looked down to find that the woman had brandished a knife and stabbed him. Shocked and defenseless, John tried to fight back, but his assailant overpowered him. She repeatedly stabbed him, seized the phone, and swiftly fled the scene, leaving John gravely wounded and bleeding profusely on the ground. Passers-by witnessed the horrifying incident and promptly dialed emergency services. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and swiftly transported John to the hospital. His injuries were critical, necessitating emergency surgery to save his life. Devastated, his loved ones prayed fervently for his recovery. Meanwhile, the authorities initiated a search for the woman who had attacked John. After reviewing the mall's surveillance footage, they successfully identified her. A few days later, they apprehended her and took her into custody. Her name was Rebecca, a troubled young woman with a history of drug addiction and multiple encounters with the law. Further investigation revealed Rebecca's involvement in various other criminal activities. Her extensive criminal record and reputation for danger were well known. Her trial was scheduled for the following year, and John was summoned to testify against her. On the day of the trial, John, still recuperating from his injuries, experienced a mixture of nerves and determination. He took the witness stand and recounted the terrifying encounter with Rebecca, reliving the traumatic experience. His testimony carried significant weight, compelling the jury of Rebecca's guilt. Rebecca received a 25-year prison sentence, finally allowing John to put the ordeal behind him. Although a challenging road to recovery lay ahead, he felt grateful for his survival and the unwavering support from his family and friends. Over the subsequent years, John diligently worked to rebuild his life. In the year 2018, in the sweltering state of Florida, a man named Mark anxiously awaited the arrival of a long-awaited package. This package held a rare guitar pick that he had been tirelessly searching for to complete his collection. Mark had scoured various online platforms and finally found it on a local classifieds website. The seller, known as Max, claimed that the pick was a limited edition from Japan and would be the perfect addition to Mark's collection. After exchanging numerous emails and phone calls, Mark agreed to meet Max at a small beachside park close to his residence. The thought of finally possessing the guitar pick filled Mark with excitement. On the day of the meeting, Mark arrived early at the park, eager to complete the transaction. As Mark waited, he noticed a suspicious group of individuals loitering around the park. Initially, he dismissed them as passers-by. However, as time passed, unease began to creep in. Max was nowhere to be seen, and the group of individuals gradually closed in on Mark. Just as Mark contemplated leaving, the group attacked him from behind. They forcibly took away his belongings, including his wallet, cell phone, and wristwatch. To add to the agony, they left him severely battered and injured, lying on the ground in a pool of blood. The assailants swiftly vanished, leaving no trace behind. Law enforcement was alerted promptly, and an investigation was initiated. It was revealed that the group had meticulously planned the robbery, specifically targeting Mark due to the valuable guitar pick he was supposed to have. However, the guitar pick was nowhere to be found, and Max had also vanished. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation seemed to stagnate. Nonetheless, a breakthrough occurred when one of the assailants was apprehended while attempting to sell Mark's wristwatch. The apprehended individual swiftly confessed to the crime and provided vital information regarding the whereabouts of the other culprits. Subsequently, the remaining assailants were apprehended one by one and brought to justice. It was unveiled that Max was the mastermind behind the robbery and had fled the state immediately after the incident. However, authorities eventually captured him and extradited him back to Florida to face trial. During the court proceedings, Max pleaded guilty to the crime and was handed a 20-year prison sentence. Meanwhile, Mark had to endure multiple surgeries and endure physical therapy to recover from his injuries. Although he never obtained the guitar pick he had longed for, the experience imparted him with a newfound appreciation for life and the people around him. Ultimately, justice prevailed, and those responsible for the heinous crime faced the consequences of their actions. Mark, scarred physically and emotionally, managed to move forward with his life, cherishing the small things that held genuine importance. The incident would forever be a part of him. He resolved not to allow it to define him. In 2015 in Oklahoma, a young woman named Jessica decided to hire a gardener through Craigslist to help her with her garden. She had recently moved into a new home with a large backyard and wanted to plant flowers and vegetables. She was a single mother of a 6-year-old boy named Tommy, who went to school during the day. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and she had a busy schedule. She thought hiring a gardener would save her time and make the garden look nice. She found an ad on Craigslist that offered gardener services for a reasonable price. The ad had a picture of a smiling man with a shovel in his hands. He looked friendly and professional. His name was Mark, and he claimed to have over 10 years of experience in landscaping and gardening. He said he could do any job from lawn mowing to tree trimming. He also said he had his own tools and transportation. Jessica decided to call him and make an appointment. She talked to Mark on the phone, and he seemed polite and helpful. He said he could come over the next day and give her a free estimate. He asked for her address and said he would be there around 10 a.m. Jessica agreed and gave him her address. She was relieved to have found someone to help her with the garden. The next day, Jessica woke up early and got ready for work. She left Tommy at the school bus stop and drove to the hospital. She hoped Mark would do a good job and she would come home with a beautiful garden. She trusted him because he seemed reliable and had good reviews on Craigslist. Meanwhile, Mark was on his way to Jessica's house with a different plan. He wasn't actually a gardener, but a rapist who used Craigslist to find his victims. He had done this many times before, picking out women who lived alone or had children. He pretended to be interested in helping them with their gardens or other household chores, gaining their trust before making his move. As Mark arrived at Jessica's house, he parked his car a few houses down to avoid suspicion. He carefully observed the surroundings, making sure no one was watching. He grabbed his bag, which contained his tools, but also a few items he used to subdue his victims. Knocking on Jessica's front door, Mark wore his friendly smile, trying to appear harmless. Jessica opened the door, and upon seeing him, she greeted him with a warm smile, believing he was the gardener she had hired. Little did she know that her life was about to take a terrifying turn. As Mark entered the house, he noticed Jessica's trusting demeanor, which only fueled his sinister intentions. He engaged in small talk, asking about her garden plans and discussing the best plants to grow in the area. Jessica, oblivious to the danger lurking behind Mark's friendly facade, enthusiastically shared her ideas. Mark then suggested they go outside to assess the garden and discuss the work that needed to be done. As they stepped into the backyard, Jessica noticed that Mark was acting strangely. His friendly demeanor had shifted to something more predatory. Instinctively, she started feeling uneasy, her heart racing with a mix of fear and intuition. Suddenly, Mark's true intentions became clear as he made a forceful advance towards Jessica. He grabbed her arm, attempting to overpower her. In that moment, Jessica's survival instincts kicked in, and she fought back with every ounce of strength she had. She screamed, hoping someone would hear her cries for help. With a burst of adrenaline, Jessica managed to break free from Mark's grip. She swiftly turned and delivered a powerful kick to his groin, momentarily incapacitating him. It was her chance to escape. She sprinted towards the front of the house, desperately seeking refuge and safety. As Jessica reached the front yard, her heart pounding in her chest, she noticed a neighbor across the street who had heard her screams and was now rushing towards her. With tears streaming down her face, she explained what had just transpired, and the neighbor immediately called the police. Meanwhile, Mark, recovering from the pain and shock, realized that his plan had been foiled. He knew he had to flee the scene before the authorities arrived. Disoriented and desperate, he stumbled back to his car and sped away, leaving behind a traumatized woman and a community on high alert. The police arrived promptly, providing Jessica with comfort and support. They conducted a thorough investigation, collecting evidence from the scene and obtaining a description of the attacker. News of the incident spread throughout the neighborhood, sparking fear and a renewed sense of vigilance among its residents. Jessica, though shaken by the traumatic experience, was determined not to let it define her or dictate her future. With the support of her loved ones, the police and professional counseling, she embarked on a journey of healing and self-empowerment. She refused to live in fear and instead became an advocate for women's safety, sharing her story to raise awareness about the dangers lurking behind seemingly trustworthy appearances. In 2014, within the bustling city of Springfield, a young man named Alex made a difficult decision to sell his cherished motorcycle through an online platform. He had dedicated significant time and money into the bike, but urgent need for cash pushed him to part with it. After posting an advertisement on a popular website, he received a message from a potential buyer who displayed interest in purchasing the motorcycle. They agreed to meet in a secluded spot outside the city, away from prying eyes. On the designated day, Alex arrived at the meeting location on time, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. The buyer, a tall individual with a shaved head, awaited his arrival. They exchanged greetings, and Alex showcased the motorcycle. The buyer appeared content and requested a test ride. Initially hesitant, Alex eventually relented when the man insisted, emphasizing the importance of ensuring the bike's condition. As soon as Alex handed over the keys, he sensed something amiss about the buyer. The individual seemed nervous and restless, constantly scanning the surroundings suspiciously. Alex tried to dismiss his unease and patiently waited for the test ride to conclude. However, minutes passed, and the sound of the engine gradually faded into the distance. Panic enveloped Alex as he realized he had been deceived. His motorcycle had been stolen, and the thief had fled. Just as he contemplated contacting the authorities, he felt the cold touch of a metallic object against his temple. Turning around, he discovered the buyer pointing a gun at him, a menacing grin adorning his face. The ensuing moments became a blur. The thief demanded Alex's hand over all his money, and upon his resistance, delivered a brutal blow to his head. Darkness engulfed him. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a hospital bed, his left hand throbbing in pain. It was then that he realized he had lost one of his fingers. The medical staff informed him that a compassionate passerby had discovered him bleeding profusely by the roadside and brought him to the hospital. Alex couldn't believe his fortune. He had survived a dreadful ordeal, albeit at the cost of losing a finger. Anger and frustration welled up within him toward the criminal who had shattered his life. The following weeks constituted a grueling and agonizing recovery process for Alex. He underwent surgery to repair the damage inflicted on his hand, bearing a prominent scar where his finger once was. Nevertheless, his determination to seek justice and hold his assailant accountable remained steadfast. The diligent efforts of the police investigation led to the apprehension of the gang member responsible for Alex's robbery. Following a court trial, the thief was found guilty of robbery and assault. Alex felt immense relief witnessing the criminal brought to justice, yet he couldn't completely shake off the trauma from the incident. As time passed, Alex discovered solace in the unwavering support of his family and friends, who rallied around him during his darkest moments. He also developed a newfound passion for assisting crime victims, subsequently joining a local organization that offered support to individuals who had undergone similar experiences. In 2014, in a small Illinois town, Jake was an aspiring musician who needed money to pay his rent. He had a guitar that he loved, but he decided to sell it through Craigslist. He placed an ad online and waited for someone to contact him. A few days later, he got a message from a guy named Mike who said he was interested in buying the guitar. Jake agreed to meet him at a nearby park and take the guitar with him. He hoped that Mike would turn out to be a nice person and maybe even a music lover. Jake arrived at the park and saw Mike sitting on a bench. He was wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses. He looked cool and confident. Jake walked up to him and greeted him. "Hi, are you Mike?" asked Jake. "Yeah, that's me." "And you must be Jake." "Nice to meet you," Mike said. "Nice to meet you too." "So, this is a guitar," Jake said, showing him the instrument. "It looks great. Can I try it?" asked Mike. "Sure, go ahead," said Jake, holding out the guitar to him. Mike took the guitar and started playing. He seemed to know what he was doing. He played a few chords and riffs. He smiled and nodded. "It's a good guitar. It sounds good. How long have you had it?" asked Mike. "I've had it for about 2 years. It was a gift from my dad." "He's a musician too," said Jake. "Really? That's cool. What kind of music do you play?" asked Mike. "I play mostly rock and blues. I play in a band with a few friends. Sometimes we play local bars and clubs," Jake said. "It's great. I love rock and the blues too. I play drums," Mike said. "Wow, really? That's cool too. Maybe we could play a jam sometime," Jake said. "Yeah, maybe," Mike said. They continued chatting for a while, exchanging stories and opinions about music. Jake felt happy and relaxed. He thought Mike was a nice guy and maybe even a potential friend. He didn't notice Mike slowly approaching him until he felt his breath on his neck. "Hey, what are you doing?" asked Jake fearfully. Mike suddenly grabbed Jake by the throat and squeezed hard. Jake gasped and tried to resist, but Mike was stronger and faster. He punched Jake in the face and knocked him out. Jake fell to the ground unconscious, and Mike quickly grabbed the guitar and ran off, disappearing into the distance. Jake's head throbbed with pain as he slowly regained consciousness. He groaned and touched his bruised cheek, trying to gather his bearings. As the reality of what had just happened sank in, anger and frustration surged through Jake's veins. How could someone he had thought was a fellow musician, someone who shared his love for music, suddenly turn violent? Jake knew he had to act quickly if he wanted to recover his precious guitar and bring Mike to justice. With a determined grimace, Jake staggered to his feet and checked his surroundings. The park was mostly empty, but there were a few people in the distance. He stumbled towards them, calling for help and explaining what had transpired. The bystanders quickly sprang into action, calling the police and providing Jake with their contact information as potential witnesses. Soon, the authorities were alerted, and a search for Mike and the stolen guitar began. Days turned into weeks, and Jake tirelessly cooperated with the police, offering any information that could help track down the thief. He shared every detail about his encounter with Mike, hoping it would lead to his arrest. The local news picked up the story, spreading the word about the stolen guitar and appealing to the community for assistance. Jake's determination paid off when a tip came in from a music store owner across town. He claimed to have seen someone matching Mike's description trying to sell a guitar that closely resembled Jake's stolen instrument. The police immediately followed up on the lead and confronted Mike at the store. Cornered and unable to escape, Mike's initial confidence crumbled as he faced the consequences of his actions. The police recovered Jake's guitar, which had been pawned for quick cash. They arrested Mike and charged him with assault and theft. Relieved to have his beloved instrument back in his possession, Jake couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. In 2017, in the bustling city of New York, a young woman named Emily had decided to capture some precious memories with her family through a professional photo shoot. With excitement and anticipation, she took to Craigslist in search of a skilled photographer who could bring her vision to life. After meticulously browsing through numerous listings, she stumbled upon an ad that caught her attention. The advertisement showcased the work of a photographer named Daniel, who claimed to have a unique talent for capturing the essence of families and their love. Intrigued by the stunning portfolio displayed on his website, Emily was convinced that Daniel was the perfect choice to immortalize her cherished moments. With butterflies fluttering in her stomach, Emily gathered her husband David and their 2 young children, Sarah and Ethan, to embark on this special adventure. She reached out to Daniel and eagerly discussed the details of the photo shoot. Daniel proposed conducting the session at his home studio, assuring Emily that the intimate environment would enhance the authenticity of their family portraits. The day of the photo shoot arrived, and Emily's excitement was palpable. She dressed her family in coordinating outfits, ensuring they looked picture perfect. With her heart filled with joy and anticipation, she drove her family to Daniel's address. As Emily pulled up to the quaint house, she couldn't help but notice a flicker of unease. The studio was situated in a somewhat secluded area surrounded by dense woods. Ignoring her apprehension, she reassured herself that this was merely the perfect backdrop for the stunning portraits they were about to create. With her family in tow, Emily approached the door of the studio. She hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling as she knocked. The door swung open, revealing a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and an unsettling grin. This man was none other than Daniel, the photographer she had entrusted with her family's memories. As Emily stepped inside the studio, her senses heightened. There was an eerie silence that hung in the air, accompanied by a faint scent of chemicals. The walls were adorned with photographs capturing the beauty of families frozen in time. However, as her eyes scanned the room, she couldn't help but notice an undercurrent of darkness lurking beneath the seemingly innocent images. Daniel motioned for Emily's family to gather in front of the backdrop adorned with fairy lights. As she positioned herself, Emily couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Suddenly, Daniel's demeanor shifted, his smile twisting into a malevolent sneer. In a chilling tone, Daniel revealed his true intentions. He locked the studio doors, trapping Emily and her family within its walls. Panic surged through Emily's veins as she realized the dire predicament they were in. Daniel, it seemed, was not the talented photographer he had claimed to be, but a maniacal individual who reveled in tormenting innocent souls. Fear etched on their faces. Emily's family huddled together, desperately seeking a way to escape the clutches of their captor. Daniel's eyes gleamed with sadistic pleasure as he threatened violence, relishing in their terror. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she fought to remain calm and devise a plan to protect her loved ones. The studio became a battleground, a fight for survival against an unhinged predator. Emily's resourcefulness and determination kicked into high gear as she scanned the room for anything that could aid their escape. She noticed a small window, obscured by heavy curtains, offering a sliver of hope. Gathering her courage, Emily concocted a diversion, distracting Daniel while her husband and children worked frantically to pry open the window. Time seemed to stretch agonizingly as they struggled against the locked frame. But finally, with a triumphant creak, the window yielded, granting them their much-needed exit. With a burst of adrenaline, Emily ushered her family through the narrow opening, guiding them to safety outside. They sprinted through the dense woods, the sound of their pounding footsteps echoing in the darkness. Fear propelled them forward, urging them to escape the clutches of their captor and find help. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a road where a passing driver noticed their frantic state and stopped to assist them. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she recounted their harrowing ordeal, grateful to have escaped the clutches of the maniacal photographer. The authorities were alerted, and a manhunt was launched to bring Daniel to justice. News of the incident spread, serving as a chilling reminder to others of the dangers lurking behind seemingly harmless encounters. Emily's family, though scarred by the experience, found solace in each other's embrace, cherishing the strength and resilience that had saved them from the clutches of darkness. And so, in the wake of this terrifying event, Emily's family learned the importance of vigilance and the indomitable power of love. They vowed to protect one another fiercely, forever grateful for the precious gift of life they had fought so valiantly to preserve. In 2018, in the bustling city of New York, a young and aspiring musician named Ethan was on the hunt for a rehearsal studio to fuel his passion for music. Determined to find an affordable space, he turned to the ever-reliable Craigslist, hoping to stumble upon a hidden gem. Little did he know that this innocent quest would lead him down a perilous path, teeming with danger and unforeseen circumstances. One fateful day, while scrolling through the listings, Ethan's eyes landed on an ad that seemed too good to be true. It claimed to offer a well-equipped rehearsal studio at a remarkably low price, nestled in a quiet corner of the city. Ignoring his better judgment, the young musician couldn't resist the allure and decided to contact the landlord, hoping to secure the space for his creative endeavors. The next morning, Ethan received a response from the landlord, a man named Victor. Victor seemed friendly and accommodating in their brief email exchange, assuring Ethan that the studio was still available and inviting him to visit it in person. Excitement tingled through Ethan's veins as he hastily agreed to the meeting, blissfully unaware of the sinister intentions lurking beneath Victor's facade. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Victor was a dangerous criminal who had devised a wicked scheme to prey upon unsuspecting victims. The studio he advertised was nothing more than a sinister trap, designed to ensnare his targets and extort money from them. With the diabolical plan already set into motion, Victor eagerly awaited Ethan's arrival at the appointed location, hidden away from prying eyes. And so, in the heart of New York City, in the year 2018, Ethan found himself standing before a nondescript building, its faded sign bearing the words, "The Sound Heaven Rehearsal Studios." Filled with anticipation, Ethan entered the dimly lit hallway and followed a narrow staircase that led him to the basement where the studio awaited his arrival. As he stepped inside, Ethan's excitement quickly transformed into trepidation. The door slammed shut behind him with a resounding thud, trapping him in an unfamiliar and claustrophobic space. Panic welled up within him as he frantically tried to open the door, only to discover that it had been securely locked from the outside. Realization washed over him like an icy wave as he comprehended the gravity of his situation. He had fallen into Victor's trap. Fear gripped Ethan's heart as he pounded on the door, desperately hoping for someone to hear his cries for help. But the sound of his pleas seemed to dissipate into the cold, lifeless air, swallowed by the depths of the abandoned studio. It became painfully clear that his only companion in this dark and forbidding place was his own growing despair. Days turned into nights, and the passage of time blurred within the confinements of the studio walls. Ethan's mind became a battleground between fear and determination. He refused to succumb to Victor's malevolent game, vowing to find a way out and reclaim his freedom. With each passing moment, he searched for any potential means of escape, meticulously examining every nook and cranny, desperate for a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, Victor reveled in his wicked triumph. He taunted Ethan with sporadic messages, his menacing voice echoing through crackling phone lines. Each demand for a ransom sent shivers down Ethan's spine, further fueling his resolve to break free from this nightmarish ordeal. In the depths of his despair, Ethan's spirit found solace in the melodies that once flowed effortlessly from his fingertips. He poured his emotions into the music, the chords becoming his unwavering allies in this battle against captivity. Though physically confined, his music became a vessel for his soul, a defiant declaration of his strength and resilience. Outside the studio, a dedicated detective named Olivia had been tirelessly investigating a string of similar disappearances. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, she sensed a connection to Victor's nefarious activities. Determined to save Ethan and put an end to Victor's reign of terror, Olivia delved deeper into the shadows, following a trail fraught with danger and deception. Days turned into weeks, and the race against time intensified. The music that echoed through the studio walls reached Olivia's ears, becoming a haunting beacon guiding her closer to Ethan's location. With unwavering determination, she gathered a team of skilled officers, prepared to confront the criminal and liberate his captive. In a final, climactic showdown, Olivia and her team stormed the dilapidated studio, their presence shattering the oppressive silence that had plagued Ethan for far too long. The resounding clash between good and evil reverberated through the air as chaos erupted within the confines of the once captive space. As the dust settled, Ethan emerged from the darkness, his spirit unbroken despite the harrowing ordeal he had endured. In his eyes, a newfound appreciation for life mingled with a steely determination to continue pursuing his musical dreams. The young musician had emerged from the crucible of captivity, forever changed but unbowed. Together, Ethan and Olivia ensured that justice was served. Victor's reign of terror came to an abrupt end as he was apprehended and faced the full weight of the law. The city, once tainted by his malevolence, breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that its streets were a little safe for now. In the aftermath of his traumatic experience, Ethan's story resonated with people around the world. His indomitable spirit and unwavering love for music inspired countless individuals, reminding them of the power of resilience in the face of adversity. Through his music, Ethan found catharsis, healing the wounds inflicted upon his soul by the clutches of a deranged criminal. And so, the echoes of Ethan's journey lingered, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the transformative power of music. In the years to come, he would continue to share his story, using his experiences to uplift others and spread a message of hope. From the depths of captivity, he had emerged as a beacon of resilience, forever marked by his fateful encounter, but not defined by it. In the year 2016, in the bustling city of New York, a young man named Jake was searching for an affordable place to live. He had recently graduated from college and was eager to start his new job, but finding suitable accommodation within his limited budget was proving to be a challenge. Frustrated with his unsuccessful attempts, Jake turned to an unlikely source, Craigslist. One evening, as he scrolled through the online listings, he stumbled upon an ad that caught his attention. It offered a spacious room in a centrally located apartment at a surprisingly low rent. Intrigued by the offer, Jake decided to take a chance and contacted the landlord, a man named Mr. Thompson. After a brief conversation, Mr. Thompson assured Jake that the room was indeed available and even offered to show it to him the next day. Excited by the prospect of finally finding an affordable place to live, Jake eagerly agreed to meet Mr. Thompson at the apartment. The following day, Jake arrived at the address provided by Mr. Thompson. The building appeared old and worn, but he brushed off any concerns, attributing them to the city's charm. As he climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor, Jake's anticipation grew. Upon reaching the designated apartment, Jake knocked on the door, and Mr. Thompson promptly opened it. He was a middle-aged man with a friendly smile and a calm demeanor. The apartment itself seemed decent, with a cozy living room and a spacious kitchen. Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. "So here's the room," Mr. Thompson said, leading Jake down a narrow hallway. The room was at the end, tucked away from the rest of the apartment. It had a lock on the door, which initially struck Jake as a safety measure rather than a cause of concern. Entering the room, Jake noticed that it was relatively bare, with only a bed, a small desk, and a chair. However, the walls were covered in numerous locks, both on the inside and outside of the door. Curiosity mixed with a tinge of unease began to creep up on him. "What's with all the locks?" Jake asked, trying to hide his growing apprehension. Mr. Thompson chuckled nervously. "Well, just a precaution. Can't be too careful these days, can we?" Not wanting to miss out on the opportunity, Jake brushed off his concerns and agreed to rent the room. He handed over the deposit and the first month's rent, and Mr. Thompson handed him the keys, including the one for the room. Days turned into weeks, and Jake settled into his new living arrangements. He found comfort in his job, but whenever he returned home, a lingering sense of unease filled his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that there was more to Mr. Thompson's story than met the eye. One evening, while Jake was cooking dinner in the communal kitchen, he overheard a conversation between Mr. Thompson and another tenant, Sarah. Their hushed voices piqued his curiosity, and he couldn't resist eavesdropping. "I can't believe he's still falling for it," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with malice. "How much longer are you going to keep him locked up?" Mr. Thompson's reply sent chills down Jake's spine. "As long as it takes. He's trapped, Sarah, and he won't be leaving anytime soon." The words echoed in Jake's mind, confirming his worst fears. He was being held captive by a psychopath. Panic surged through his veins as he realized the true extent of the danger he was in. Determined to escape his nightmarish situation, Jake devised a plan. He knew he had to bide his time, gather information, and find a way to outsmart his captor. Every night, while Mr. Thompson slept, Jake meticulously examined the locks in his room, trying to decipher their secrets. Months passed, and Jake's knowledge of the locks grew. He discovered hidden patterns, faulty mechanisms, and weaknesses he could exploit. With each passing day, his confidence grew, but so did his captor's suspicion. One fateful night, as Jake was on the brink of unlocking the final lock, he heard a key turn in the front door. Fear gripped him, and he hurriedly retreated to his bed, pretending to be fast asleep. Mr. Thompson's footsteps approached, and the door to Jake's room creaked open. "Awake, are we?" Mr. Thompson's voice dripped with menace. Jake's heart raced as he pretended to stir from his slumber. "What's going on?" he mumbled, feigning confusion. Mr. Thompson's smile turned sinister. "I know what you've been up to, Jake. Trying to escape, are we? Well, it's time to put an end to that." In one swift motion, Mr. Thompson lunged at Jake, overpowering him with his sheer strength. Bound and gagged, Jake's desperate struggle was met with cold indifference. Mr. Thompson reveled in his power, relishing in the terror that filled Jake's eyes. But unbeknownst to Mr. Thompson, Jake's perseverance had not been in vain. Over the months of studying the locks and planning his escape, Jake had managed to conceal a small hidden knife beneath his mattress. As Mr. Thompson gloated over his captive, Jake's mind raced. He knew that his only chance of survival was to seize the moment when it presented itself. With every ounce of strength and determination he possessed, he fought against his restraints, desperately trying to free himself. Suddenly, a moment of opportunity arose. Mr. Thompson, momentarily distracted by a noise from the hallway, loosened his grip on Jake. Sensing the chance he had been waiting for, Jake swiftly reached for the hidden knife and, with a surge of adrenaline, managed to cut through his bindings. In a swift motion, Jake lunged at Mr. Thompson, his years of pent-up fear and frustration fueling his every move. The struggle between them intensified, each fighting for control. As they wrestled, Jake's mind raced, contemplating his next move. With a burst of strength, Jake managed to push Mr. Thompson off balance, causing him to stumble backward and hit his head against the corner of the room's desk. A momentary daze enveloped Mr. Thompson, providing Jake with the advantage he needed. Realizing that his opportunity to escape was fleeting, Jake swiftly grabbed the keys from Mr. Thompson's pocket and sprinted toward the front door. The adrenaline coursing through his veins pushed him to his limits, propelling him forward with an intensity he had never experienced before. With trembling hands, Jake fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to find the correct one to unlock the front door. The sound of Mr. Thompson recovering from the blow and giving chase only fueled Jake's determination. Finally, the right key slid into the lock, and with a click, the door swung open. Jake burst out into the hallway, his breath ragged and his heart pounding. He could hardly believe he had made it out alive. He knew he had to act quickly, and with the clarity born of survival instincts, he sprinted down the stairs and out onto the city streets, never looking back. Gasping for air, Jake finally found a safe spot and pulled out his phone, dialing the emergency number for the police. He recounted his harrowing ordeal, providing them with Mr. Thompson's address, every detail he could remember. Help was on its way. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene, storming into Mr. Thompson's apartment. It found him disoriented and injured, still recovering from the blow to his head. He was swiftly apprehended, his reign of terror finally brought to an end. In the aftermath of his escape, Jake received support and counseling to help him recover from the traumatic experience. He struggled with nightmares and anxiety for some time, but gradually regained his sense of security and trust in others. Jake's story served as a cautionary tale, shedding light on the dangers of online transactions and the importance of vigilance when searching for accommodations. His experience prompted a closer examination of safety measures and regulations surrounding rental platforms, ensuring that others would be better protected from similar situations. As for Jake, he emerged from the terrifying ordeal with a newfound appreciation for life and determination to make the most of every opportunity. He continued to pursue his career and surrounded himself with a strong support network of friends and loved ones who helped him rebuild his life. The memory of those dark days would forever be etched in his mind, serving as a reminder of his strength and resilience. Jake vowed to use his experience to advocate for the rights of others, supporting organizations that worked tirelessly to prevent and address similar cases of exploitation and abuse. Through his courage and determination, Jake not only survived the clutches of a psychopath, but also became a beacon of hope and inspiration for others who had faced similar horrors. His story would forever serve as a testament to the power of the human spirit and the importance of never giving up, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. It was a sunny day in Oklahoma when Carolyn decided to sell her car. She had recently bought a new one, and the old car was just taking up space in her garage. Carolyn decided to use Craigslist, a popular website for buying and selling goods. She created an ad for her car and waited for someone to contact her. Soon enough, she received a message from someone who seemed interested. The man said he was available to meet later that day, and Carolyn agreed to meet him. When Carolyn arrived at the meeting place, however, the man was nowhere to be found. Instead, she was met by a young boy who introduced himself as the man's son. The boy was friendly and seemed harmless, but Carolyn felt uneasy. Suddenly, the boy attacked Carolyn with a knife. She fought back, but she was no match with the young attacker. Carolyn died from her wounds, and the boy fled the scene. The police were called to investigate the crime, and they soon discovered that the boy's name was Kyle Smith. He was only 16 years old and had a troubled past. Kyle was arrested and brought in for questioning. During the interrogation, Kyle confessed to killing Carolyn. He explained that he and his father, Jeremy Smith, had used Craigslist to lure victims in the past. They would pose as customers and attack and rob people. The police were shocked to hear this and launched an investigation into Jeremy Smith. They discovered that he was involved in the murders as well and was using his son as a pawn. As the investigation continued, more details emerged. It was revealed that Kyle Smith was also connected to another murder that was committed while selling a phone on Craigslist. He had confessed to killing that victim as well. The media was quick to pick up on this story, and it became a national headline. People were outraged by the senseless murders and demanded justice for the victims. The case drew attention to the security issue when using Craigslist, and the website was forced to take extra measures to protect its users. Many laws were created to improve the security of online transactions, and people became more cautious when using the internet to buy and sell goods. In the end, Kyle and Jeremy Smith were both convicted of the murders and were sentenced to life in prison. The families of the victims finally found closure, but the tragedy would never be forgotten. It served as a reminder of the dangers of online transactions and the importance of being vigilant when using the internet. My opinion, the story above serves as a reminder of the dangers that lurk on the internet. It teaches us to be cautious when engaging in online transactions, especially when dealing with strangers. We should always prioritize our safety and take extra measures to protect ourselves from potential harm. One day in 2016, a young woman had long wanted a new cell phone. She had been saving up for a long time, but the expense was beyond her control. One day she decided to look on Craigslist, a popular online platform for buying and selling goods, to find a good deal on a cell phone. After a while, she came across a seller who had exactly the model she was looking for and was selling it at a very reasonable price. The woman was excited about this opportunity and decided to contact the seller to arrange a meeting. The seller agreed to meet with her, and they set a date and time for the transaction. The seller invited the woman to come to his home to inspect the phone in person and finalize the transaction. She hesitated, but after some deliberation she agreed. On the day of the meeting, the woman arrived at the seller's house, and he greeted her warmly. He showed her the phone, and she examined it carefully, being satisfied with its condition. The salesman then offered to buy her a cup of coffee, to which the woman agreed. After drinking the coffee, the woman felt sick, but before she knew it, she lost consciousness. When she woke up, she found herself in a dark room, and the salesperson was hovering over her, trying to attack her. She screamed and fought back as hard as she could, but the salesman overpowered her and beat her severely. The woman was in a state of shock and terror, and all she could think about was how to escape. After a while, she managed to free herself and run out of the house. She immediately called the police and reported what had happened. The police began an investigation, and it was later discovered that the salesman had committed similar crimes before. The woman's ordeal was not the first, and certainly not the last. In the end, the seller was caught and brought to justice. The woman was relentless in her desire for justice and determined that the seller be punished for his crimes. After a long and difficult legal battle, the salesman was found guilty of rape and assault and sentenced to a long prison term. The woman was left with physical and emotional scars that would take a long time to heal. But she was grateful for the support she received from her family, friends, and authorities. She was also relieved that justice was served and that the seller would no longer be able to hurt anyone else. In conclusion, this story highlights the dangers of online transactions, especially when meeting strangers in an unfamiliar place. It also serves as a reminder of how important it is to report crimes and seek justice, even though the process can be difficult and time-consuming. This woman's courage and determination testify to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. My opinion: this story is a reminder of the importance of being cautious when making online transactions with strangers. It also shows the importance of reporting crimes and seeking justice, no matter how difficult it may be. Overall, it highlights the need for vigilance and the power of resilience in overcoming adversity. In the summer of 2018 in the state of Texas, a young boy named Jack was searching for a car to buy through the online marketplace, Craigslist. After browsing through countless listings, he finally found a car that caught his attention. A sleek red convertible that looked perfect for cruising around town. Jack quickly contacted the seller, who agreed to meet him at his house to show him the car. Excited about the prospect of finally owning his own car, Jack hopped into his old beat-up sedan and made his way to the seller's house. As he pulled up to the address provided, Jack felt a sense of unease. The house was located in a rough part of town, and there were several shady characters hanging around outside. However, Jack was determined to see the car, so he got out of his car and approached the house. As he knocked on the door, it suddenly swung open, and several men rushed out and attacked him. Jack tried to fight back, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. The men beat him mercilessly, leaving him bloodied and bruised on the ground. They then proceeded to steal his car and any money he had on him before fleeing the scene. Jack woke up in a hospital bed several hours later, confused and in pain. He couldn't believe what had just happened to him. The doctors told him that he had several broken bones and would need to stay in the hospital for a few days to recover. As he lay in his hospital bed, Jack couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to him. He felt violated and angry, and he wanted justice. He knew that he had to do something about what had happened to him. After he was discharged from the hospital, Jack contacted the police and filed a report about the attack. However, there wasn't much that they could do. The attackers had taken his car, which meant that there was no evidence to link them to the crime. Jack felt hopeless and frustrated. Months went by, and Jack slowly started to recover from his injuries. However, he still felt a sense of unease whenever he thought about what had happened to him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the men who had attacked him were still out there somewhere. One day, while he was out for a walk, Jack spotted his old car parked outside of a rundown apartment building. He couldn't believe it. This was a car that had been stolen from him during the attack. He quickly called the police, who arrived on the scene a few minutes later. As they searched the apartment building, they found the men who had attacked Jack. They were all arrested and charged with robbery and assault. Jack felt a sense of relief, knowing that justice had finally been served. My opinion: the story above teaches me the importance of being cautious and aware of my surroundings, especially when making purchases online. It also reminds me that there are people out there who will do anything to make a quick buck, even if it means hurting someone else in the process. Lastly, it highlights the importance of seeking justice when wronged, even if it takes time and effort. The year was 2014, and the United States was shaken by a horrific crime that would leave its mark in history. It all started with a young woman who decided to hire a gardener to care for her yard. In order to find a suitable candidate, she placed an ad on the Craigslist website, hoping to find someone reliable and trustworthy. Soon enough, her request was answered by a man who introduced himself as a gardener and arranged to meet her at her home address. The woman was relieved to have found someone who seemed so competent and professional, and she eagerly awaited the day when he would come to her home and take care of her lawn. However, when the gardener arrived at the site, things took a sinister turn. Instead of working on the yard, he attacked and killed the unsuspecting woman. It was a brutal and heinous crime that left the entire neighborhood in shock and disbelief. The police were immediately alerted to the situation and launched a full-scale investigation into the matter. They quickly discovered that the man who had posed as a gardener had used a false name and had only introduced himself as such in order to lure the victim to his property. As the investigation progressed, more and more details emerged about the suspect. It was discovered that he had a long history of violent crimes and had spent years in and out of prison. He was a dangerous and unpredictable individual who posed a serious threat to society. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, the suspect remained at large for several days. However, eventually, the police were able to track him down and apprehend him. He was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The trial was a highly publicized event, with people from all over the country tuning in to watch the proceedings. The evidence against the suspect was overwhelming, and there was no doubt that he was guilty of the crime. The victim's family and friends were in attendance, seeking closure and justice for the young woman whose life had been tragically cut short. In the end, the suspect was found guilty and sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. It was a small comfort to the victim's loved ones, but at least they knew that the man responsible for her death would never again be able to harm anyone else. The crime that occurred on that fateful day in 2014 was a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind the anonymity of the internet. It was a tragedy that should never have happened, and it serves as a cautionary tale for anyone who uses online services to find workers or services. The importance of being vigilant and taking precautions cannot be overstated, and we must all do our part to ensure that such crimes never happen again. My opinion. This story teaches me the importance of being cautious when using online services to find workers or services. It also reminds me that people are not always who they claim to be, and that I should take steps to protect myself and my loved ones from potential dangers. Finally, it shows me that justice can be served, even in the face of such a heinous crime. The city of Baltimore, Maryland, has always been known for its lively streets, beautiful harbor, and friendly people. But in 2018, a grim incident occurred that shook the city to its core. A man, whose name remains unknown, decided to sell his laptop computer through the popular online marketplace Craigslist. He arranged to meet a potential buyer in a public place, hoping for a quick sale. However, he was then brutally attacked and hospitalized for several weeks as a result. A man arranged to meet a potential buyer at a busy cafe on the outskirts of town. He arrived early, eager to close the deal and get on with his day. As he waited, he sipped hot coffee and checked his phone for messages. Finally, a potential buyer showed up, dressed in a sweatshirt and jeans. He looked nervous, but the man didn't give it much thought. They greeted each other, and the buyer asked to see the laptop. As the man opened his backpack to retrieve the laptop, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in the back of his head. He staggered forward, dropping the backpack, and turned around and saw 3 men rushing toward him. Before he could react, they started punching and kicking him. He fell to the ground, trying to defend himself from the blows. The assailants then took his backpack, which contained a laptop and some money, and fled the scene. The man was found by a passerby who called an ambulance. He was rushed to the hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery for a fractured skull and other injuries. His family and friends were shocked and saddened by the news, and the incident quickly became a hot local news topic. Police launched an investigation, but it was difficult to track down the assailants because they hid their faces and left no trace. The man spent several weeks in the hospital recovering from his injuries. Family and friends visited him regularly, bringing him food, books, and flowers. The local community also rallied around him, offering support and wishes. Slowly but surely he began to regain his strength and sense of optimism. He knew he was lucky to have survived the attack and was determined to move on with his life. Several months passed, and the man had almost forgotten what had happened. Then one day, the police called him. They had caught one of the attackers, who was connected to several other crimes in the area. The man was relieved and grateful for the news. He felt that justice had been served, and he was finally able to put the incident behind him. He made a full recovery and subsequently sold his laptop through a safer online platform. This incident taught him a valuable lesson about the dangers of online marketplaces, but he didn't let fear rule his life. He moved forward with a newfound sense of resilience and determination, ready for any challenge. My opinion: the story of the man who was robbed and beaten while selling his laptop through Craigslist is a reminder of the dangers of online marketplaces and the importance of taking precautions when meeting strangers. It also highlights the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community in times of adversity. In 2013, the peaceful town of Michigan was shaken to its core when a brutal murder occurred involving the use of Craigslist. The victim was a young woman who had responded to an advertisement on Craigslist about a car for sale. The advertisement had been posted by a man who had nefarious intentions. The victim arrived at the meeting place, thinking that she would be able to test drive the car and make an offer. However, as soon as she got out of her car, the man attacked her. He beat her mercilessly, leaving her for dead. Then he stole her car and left her bleeding on the ground. The news of the murder spread like wildfire throughout the town, and soon the police were on the case. They interviewed witnesses, checked CCTV footage, and used every tool at their disposal to catch the killer. However, the case seemed to be going nowhere. The killer had left no clues behind, and the police were at a loss as to what to do. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but the killer remained at large. The people of Michigan were scared and angry. They demanded justice for the victim and wanted the killer to be caught and punished. Then a breakthrough occurred. One of the witnesses who had seen the killer on the day of the murder remembered seeing him drive a car that matched the description of the victim's car. The police followed up on this lead, and it led them to the killer. The killer was a man in his mid-30s who had a history of violence and drug abuse. He had used Craigslist to lure his victim, and he had done it before. It turned out that he had committed similar crimes in the past, using Craigslist to find victims. The killer was caught, and he was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, the damage had already been done. The murder had left a scar on the town of Michigan, and people were afraid to use Craigslist. The case highlighted the importance of safety when using online services. It showed that people needed to be vigilant and cautious when using sites like Craigslist. The authorities started campaigns to educate people about the dangers of using online services and how to stay safe while doing so. In conclusion, the murder in Michigan was a tragic event that shook the town to its core. It showed how the use of online services like Craigslist can lead to terrible consequences if not used with caution. The killer was caught and punished, but the damage had already been done. The case served as a reminder that safety should always be a priority when using online services. My opinion: this story teaches us the importance of being cautious and vigilant while using online services like Craigslist. We should always be aware of the potential dangers and take steps to protect ourselves. It is a reminder that safety should be our top priority while using online platforms. In the summer of 2019, the state of California was shaken by a gruesome crime that made headlines across the country. It all started with a man who had a yacht and a sinister plan. He would use the Craigslist website to lure unsuspecting women onto his vessel. where he would commit heinous acts of violence against them. The man, whose name was later revealed to be John, was a smooth talker who knew how to charm his victims. He would post fictitious advertisements for jobs on his yacht, promising high pay and adventure. These ads caught the attention of many young women who were looking for a break from their mundane lives. John's yacht was docked in one of California's busiest marinas, which made it easy for him to attract potential victims. He would interview them and ask them to fill out forms, making the whole process seem legitimate. Once he had chosen his prey, he would take them on a tour of his yacht, showing them the luxurious cabins and the stunning views of the ocean. But what the women didn't know was that they were walking straight into a trap. Once they were on board, John would reveal his true intentions. He would overpower them and commit unspeakable acts of violence, leaving them traumatized and scarred for life. For months, John continued to operate his twisted scheme, luring women onto his yacht and subjecting them to brutal attacks. But eventually, his luck ran out. One of his victims managed to escape and report the crime to the authorities. The police launched an investigation and soon identified John as the culprit. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of assault, kidnapping, and drug trafficking. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case sent shockwaves through the community and made people aware of the dangers of online platforms like Craigslist. The authorities began monitoring the site more closely and taking steps to prevent crimes committed through it. The story of John and his yacht will forever remain a cautionary tale, reminding us that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. It's a reminder that we should always be vigilant and careful, especially when dealing with strangers online. My opinion? The story of John and his yacht is a chilling reminder that we must be vigilant when it comes to our safety, especially online. It's essential to be cautious when dealing with strangers and to trust our instincts when something doesn't feel right. We must also take steps to protect ourselves, such as checking reviews and verifying information before committing to any plans or jobs. The small town of New Roxall in upstate New York has always been known for its picturesque scenery and close-knit community. It was a place where everyone knew each other and people left their doors unlocked at night. But that all changed in 2012 when a man named Gilberto Valenzuela moved in here. Valenzuela had bought a large farm on the outskirts of town, and at first he seemed like a hard-working and friendly neighbor. He often invited people over for barbecues and lent a helping hand to those who needed it. But there was something unsettling about him, some kind of vibe that made people worry. Only when the police made the gruesome discovery did they realize how dangerous Valenzuela was. The young man's headless body was found buried in the garden of the farm, and the investigation uncovered several other body parts belonging to different victims. As it turned out, Valenzuela used the popular Craigslist classified site to lure young people to his farm. He offered them jobs, knowing that many of them had legal or substance problems and were desperate for work. As soon as they arrived at the farm, Valenzuela would kill them and separate their bodies into pieces. The town was in shock. People couldn't believe that something so horrible could have happened in their quiet town. The police launched an extensive investigation, and Valenzuela was eventually apprehended and brought to trial. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case sparked widespread outrage and drew attention to the dangers associated with using Craigslist. People were reminded of the importance of caution when meeting strangers online and the potential risks of accepting job offers from unknown sources. New Roxall residents have struggled to come to terms with what happened. The once friendly and trusting environment was shattered, and people began locking their doors at night. But gradually, they began to rebuild. They banded together to support the families of the victims and get justice. As the years passed, the memory of Valenzuela's crimes began to fade, but the scars he left behind will never fully heal. The city will never be the same again, and tragedy will forever be part of its history. But the people of New Roxall did not let tragedy define them. They went on living their lives, loving, growing, and honoring those whose lives were cut short by Gilberto Valenzuela. My opinion. This story is a stark reminder of the dangers of the internet and the importance of being cautious when dealing with strangers online. It is also a reminder that evil can exist in the most unexpected places, even in a small and seemingly idyllic town. In 2018, Julian Mendoza, a resident of Fort Collins, Colorado, decided to sell his car. He placed an advertisement on the popular classifieds website, Craigslist. Soon after, he received a call from a young woman who was interested in purchasing his car. They agreed to meet outside a local shopping mall to inspect the car. When Mendoza arrived at the meeting place, he saw two men waiting for him. They introduced themselves as buyers, and Mendoza got into the car to demonstrate its features. However, the conversation soon turned to money, and one of the men offered Mendoza $10,000 for the car. Mendoza, however, declined the offer, stating that he had a higher price in mind. Suddenly, one of the men pulled out a knife and began threatening him. The other man quickly got into the car, and Mendoza saw that there was already someone in the back seat of the car. It was a young woman who had called him earlier. Mendoza tried to resist, but the two men overpowered him and began beating him mercilessly. They left him at the scene and drove away in his car, with the kidnapped woman still in the back seat. The police were alerted immediately, and a manhunt began for the culprits. Within hours, the stolen car was spotted, and a high-speed chase ensued. The police managed to corner the suspects in a deserted alleyway, and they were taken into custody. The suspects were charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and several other crimes. During the investigation, it was revealed that the young woman who had called Mendoza was also a victim of the suspect's kidnapping scheme. They had lured her to the meeting place, pretending to be interested in purchasing her car. Once they had her in their grasp, they held her hostage until they could find a way to sell her car. Julian Mendoza survived the ordeal, but he suffered from severe injuries and the loss of his car. He never imagined that a simple Craigslist transaction would turn into a near-death experience. He was grateful to the police for their swift action in capturing the culprits and bringing them to justice. My opinion, the story of Julian Mendoza's experience with Craigslist is a cautionary tale. It is a reminder that while the internet has made it easy to buy and sell items, there are always risks involved. People should always take precautions when meeting strangers, especially when conducting transactions online. It is also a reminder that crime can happen anywhere, even in a seemingly safe community like Fort Collins, Colorado. Madison had been excited to move into her new apartment in Arizona. She had found the perfect place and was eager to start her new life. But moving can be a hassle, so she decided to hire someone to help her move her belongings from her old apartment to the new one. That's when she found an ad on Craigslist for a man named Jason who offered his services as a mover. She contacted him, and they set up a time and place to meet. On the day of the move, Madison met Jason at her old apartment. He arrived in a van and seemed friendly enough. Madison began to load her belongings into the van, while Jason watched. After a while, they were ready to head to the new apartment. Madison got into her car and followed Jason in his van. When they arrived at the new apartment, Madison began unloading her belongings while Jason remained in the car. But suddenly, he got out of the van and approached Madison with a menacing look on his face. He demanded her money and valuables and threatened her with violence. Madison was shocked and frightened, but managed to give him some money to get him to leave. She was relieved when he got back into the van and drove away. Madison was in a state of shock after the incident. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she had to report it to the police. She immediately called 911 and provided them with a description of Jason and his van. The police arrived quickly, and Madison gave them a detailed account of what had happened. They assured her that they would do everything they could to catch the perpetrator. The police wasted no time in tracking down Jason. They used Madison's description to find his van and apprehend him. Jason was charged with robbery and crimes against the person. The court sentenced him to indefinite imprisonment, and Madison was relieved to know that he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. In the end, Madison learned a valuable lesson. She realized that she should have been more careful when hiring someone from Craigslist. She was lucky that she wasn't hurt, but she knew that things could have been much worse. She vowed to be more cautious in the future and to always trust her instincts when dealing with strangers. In the end, Madison was able to move on from the incident and start her new life in her new apartment. She knew that she would never forget what had happened, but she also knew that she wouldn't let it define her. She was determined to live her life to the fullest and to never let anyone take away her sense of security and peace of mind. It was 2011 in the state of Texas, and a group of young men were up to no good. They had a scheme to lure innocent victims to their parties through advertisements on Craigslist. These parties were nothing like the usual gatherings that one would attend. The victims would arrive, and the group would violently assault them. This group of men was not your ordinary bunch. They had a dark side that they kept hidden from the world, but it was about to be exposed. They would use illegal substances to weaken the victims' resistance and immobilize them. The victims were helpless, unable to defend themselves against the attacks. The authorities soon caught wind of these heinous acts, and an investigation was launched. The group had no idea what was coming their way. They thought they had it all under control, but they were wrong. The police had gathered enough evidence to arrest all members of the group. The trial was a shocking affair. The crimes that were committed were brutal and heinous, and the victims' testimonies were heart-wrenching. It was clear that the group had committed several violent acts, but the police were sure that there were many more victims who were unable to testify. The group was found guilty of their crimes and received lengthy prison sentences. The story of this group of young men shocked the world. It was a clear reminder that evil can lurk in even the most unsuspecting places. The victims' lives would never be the same, but justice had been served. The group would never again be able to inflict harm on anyone. This story serves as a cautionary tale to us all. It reminds us to be vigilant and aware of our surroundings. We must never let our guard down, and we must always be prepared to defend ourselves against those who seek to harm us. My opinion? The story of the group of young men who lured victims to their parties through advertisements on Craigslist is a chilling one. Their heinous acts shocked the world, and justice was served. This story reminds us of the importance of being vigilant and aware of our surroundings, and it is a reminder that evil can lurk in even the most unsuspecting places. We must never let our guard down and always be prepared to defend ourselves against those who seek to harm us. It was a typical evening when I decided to sell my headphones on Craigslist. I wasn't expecting much, just some extra cash to put towards a new pair. A guy named Squirrely messaged me, and we agreed on a time and location for the exchange. But I had a prior engagement and asked my boyfriend to do it for me. Days went by, and I thought nothing of it until I received a barrage of emails from Squirrely. He was furious that I didn't show up in person, as he was expecting a female seller. He accused me of betraying the agreement and demanded that I settle this by visiting his home address. I was taken aback and began to feel uneasy about the whole situation. Who was this guy, and what did he want from me? After several days of harassment, I threatened to call the police and blocked his messages. I hoped that would be the end of it, but the feeling of unease lingered. What would have happened if I had gone to his house? Would I have been safe? One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a strange noise outside my window. It was like scratching, as if someone was trying to pry it open. I froze, not daring to move or make a sound. The scratching continued for what seemed like an eternity until it finally stopped. I tried to convince myself that it was just a branch, but deep down, I knew it was something more sinister. I knew I had to take action, but I didn't know where to turn. I confided in my boyfriend, who suggested that we install security cameras around our apartment. We also contacted the police, who advised us to be vigilant and report any suspicious activity. Days turned into weeks, and the constant fear began to take a toll on my mental health. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't even leave the house without feeling like I was being watched. But just as I was about to give up hope, the police called me with some news. They had arrested Squirrely for breaking into a woman's house and assaulting her. When they searched his apartment, they found a stash of stolen items, including my headphones. It was a relief to know that he was off the streets and couldn't harm anyone else. But even though he was in jail, the fear remained. I knew that there were others out there, just like Squirrely, waiting to prey on innocent victims. And as I looked out the window, I couldn't help but wonder if they were watching me too. As a struggling writer, I had spent countless hours scouring the internet for job postings that might help me make ends meet. So when I stumbled upon an ad on Craigslist promising a steady $500 a week and a place to live, I couldn't resist. The ad mentioned that over 200 applicants had applied, but I was confident in my writing skills and figured I had a shot. After a series of interviews with a man named Mark, I was thrilled to learn that I had landed the job. Mark told me that the position involved watching over a farm in rural Ohio and making sure everything was running smoothly. It sounded like the perfect opportunity to escape the city and clear my head. On the day of my scheduled meeting with Mark, I waited nervously on the side of the road for his associate to pick me up. A burly man in a white van pulled up and introduced himself as Jack. He said that Mark had sent him to collect me and that we needed to drive deeper into the countryside to reach the farm. As we drove, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The trees around us seemed to close in, and I began to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. But when we finally reached a dense thicket of trees, Jack led me through the underbrush, assuring me that we were almost there. It was then that I heard the sound of a gun being cocked. I spun around just in time to see Jack pointing a pistol at my face. The next thing I knew, a bullet had shattered my elbow, and I fell to the ground in agony. I crawled away as fast as I could, but Jack and his accomplice, a young man he introduced as his nephew, pursued me through the woods. They fired round after round at my back, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before they caught up to me. But just when I thought it was over, I stumbled upon an abandoned cabin hidden deep in the woods. I pushed my way inside, slamming the door shut behind me, and collapsed onto the floor. It was hours before I could muster up the strength to leave the cabin and seek help. When I finally stumbled upon a nearby town, I was covered in blood and shaking with fear. But as I told my story to the police, I realized the horrifying truth. Jack and his accomplice had lured men into the woods with the promise of a job, just like they had with me. And they had already killed 3 men and buried their bodies in shallow graves. The thought of what could have happened to me if I hadn't managed to escape filled me with dread. I shuddered at the memory of Jack's gun pointing at my face and the sound of bullets whizzing past my head. But as I looked back on that day, I knew that I had survived for a reason. The memory of that harrowing experience would stay with me for the rest of my life, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most innocent of job ads. It was a dark and stormy night, the perfect backdrop for the horror that was about to unfold. The sound of rain tapping against the windows of Lily Hernandez's apartment provided a calming background noise as she prepared for a night of work. She had been working as a sex worker in downtown Los Angeles for a few months now, and it was the only way she could make ends meet. Lily Hernandez was a beautiful woman, with long curly black hair and bright green eyes. She was only 27 years old, but life had been hard on her. She had grown up in a broken home, and her parents had abandoned her at a young age. She had turned to drugs to ease the pain, but that had only made things worse. Now she was trying to turn her life around, but it was a difficult journey. On the evening of July 12, 2016, Lily received a message from a man named David Rodriguez. He had seen her ad on one of the online platforms and wanted to meet her. Lily was hesitant at first, but she needed the money. After some negotiation, they agreed to meet at a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Lily arrived at the hotel, and David was waiting for her in the lobby. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a menacing demeanor. Lily felt uneasy, but she pushed her fear aside and followed him up to the room. Once they were alone, David demanded his money back from Lily. She refused, and that's when things took a turn for the worse. David's face twisted into a mask of rage, and he lunged at Lily. She fought back with all her might, but he was too strong for her. He pinned her down and began to strangle her. Lily's vision started to blur, and she felt her consciousness slipping away. In her final moments, she thought of all the things she wished she could have done differently. David realized what he had done and panicked. He drove her body to a secluded area near the Angeles National Forest and buried her in a shallow grave. He thought he had gotten away with the perfect crime, but he was wrong. The investigation into Lily's disappearance began when her family reported her missing. The authorities soon discovered that she had been seen with David the night she disappeared. They tracked him down and questioned him. David denied any involvement at first, but he eventually cracked under the pressure. The police were able to locate Lily's body in the shallow grave, and David was arrested and charged with her murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The tragedy of Lily Hernandez's death shook the community to its core. Her family and friends were devastated, and the incident brought attention to the dangers that sex workers face every day. It was a harsh reminder that life is fragile, and that anything can happen at any moment. As the rain continued to fall outside, Lily's memory lived on in the hearts of those who loved her. Her tragic story would never be forgotten, and it would serve as a warning to others to be careful and always look out for themselves. Emily had just moved to the city for a new job and needed an affordable way to get around. She had been searching for a used bicycle for weeks and finally came across a listing on Craigslist that looked perfect. The bike was in great condition and the seller was asking a very reasonable price. Excited, Emily reached out to the seller and they agreed to meet in a park in a nearby neighborhood. As she arrived at the park, she looked around for the seller but didn't see anyone who matched the photo he had sent her. She waited for a few minutes, feeling uneasy and nervous, until a man approached her. "Are you Emily?" the man asked. Emily nodded, relieved that she had finally found the seller. The man looked nothing like the photo he had sent her. He was tall and had a scruffy beard, and his eyes darted around nervously. "Let's make this quick," he said, his voice gruff. Emily handed him the money, and the man handed her the bike. She inspected it quickly and was satisfied that it was in good condition. She was about to ride away when the man grabbed her backpack and started to run. Emily was stunned for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then she started to chase after him, but the man was too fast. She was alone and didn't have her phone, so she couldn't call for help. As Emily ran, she realized that she was in a part of the city that she didn't know well. She had heard stories of people getting robbed on Craigslist, but she never thought it would happen to her. Desperate for help, Emily looked around for someone who could help her. Finally, she saw a police car parked nearby and ran over to it, gasping for breath. "Please help me," she cried. "Someone just stole my backpack and my bike." The officers listened carefully to Emily's story and quickly took action. They searched the area and were able to catch the man who had stolen her belongings. Emily's backpack and bike were recovered, and the man was taken into custody. Emily was shaken by the experience and realized that she needed to be more cautious when buying things on Craigslist. She vowed to only meet with sellers in public places and to bring a friend with her whenever possible. As she rode her new bike home, she couldn't shake the feeling of fear that had settled over her. She knew that she had been lucky to escape the situation unharmed. But she also knew that not everyone was as fortunate. From that day on, Emily made it a point to stay vigilant and aware of the dangers of buying things on Craigslist. She had learned the hard way that the convenience of online shopping can come at a high cost. I had always heard about scams on Craigslist, but I never thought it would happen to me. I was selling my beloved motorcycle on the site, hoping to get some quick cash before heading off to college. To my surprise, I received an offer for my asking price, which was a bit high. But as the saying goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. The buyer, who claimed he was out of state, wanted to pay through PayPal and have his brother come pick up the motorcycle and ship it for him. Red flags started popping up in my mind, but I figured I wouldn't do anything until the money was in my account. Things took a turn for the worse when the buyer claimed he couldn't send the shipping money to his brother and wanted to add the cost to my PayPal account. I knew this was fishy, so I refused to do anything until I had received the money. That's when I got an email from PayPal asking me to send $1,200 to some random bank to a shipping company. I knew something was off, especially since there was no money in my account. I told the buyer there was no money in my account and I wouldn't do anything until I received it. He responded with some half-hearted excuse about needing me to send the money to get the money, but I wasn't buying it. I wasn't about to send $1,200 to some unknown entity, especially when I didn't even have the money in the first place. I thought I had escaped the scam, but the worst was yet to come. When I refreshed my posting, the buyer messaged me again with the same pitch as before, as if our entire interaction had never happened. My heart sank. I realized this wasn't just some innocent scammer looking to make a quick buck. This was someone who was persistent and wanted something from me. I immediately deleted the post and blocked the buyer's account, hoping that would be the end of it. But for days after, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I felt like I was being watched, like someone was always around the corner waiting for me. It was as if the scammer was still there, lurking in the shadows and waiting for his chance to strike. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep when I heard a noise outside my window. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard footsteps getting closer and closer. My heart raced as I realized someone was trying to break in. I tried to call the police, but my phone was dead. I was alone and defenseless, with nothing but my fear to protect me. Just as I thought it was the end for me, the footsteps stopped. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The intruder was gone, as quickly and quietly as he had come. I didn't sleep that night, or the nights that followed. I was always on edge, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the next attack. In the end, I never found out who was trying to break in, but I knew deep down it was the same person who had tried to scam me on Craigslist. They weren't just after my money, they were after me. And now, I live in constant fear, wondering when they'll come back for me again.